Okay, so yesterday we learned a very interesting case where the Shomer had an incident where the Aveda, or not the Aveda, I apologize, the Metzia, again, no, that's wrong again, the Pekadon was stolen from him. And he could have sworn fair and square and become Potter. Instead, he said he was going to pay. And then the Ganav was discovered. The Bailam, who should be out of the picture, because once he pays, instead of swearing and getting himself freed from any type of payment, he was generous and he paid. So the Bailam are makna, the mission of the Bailam are makna the kefel to the shomer. And now the Bailam got involved. They went to the Ganav, they approached the Ganav and said, give us the object back. And the Ganav was moida. But when the shomer mond the same Ganav, the Ganav denied, therefore the shomer brought Adam. So the question is, we know moida beknas is potter. But if you're moida beknas to some third party, some unrelated party, then you're not potter. You have to be moida to the Bailam. Question is, does the Bailam here retain its status of the Bailam, even though they've already given up the object, because it was already paid for by the shomer? So maybe the Haidah that was made to the shomer, maybe the Haidah that was made to the Bailam is not a valid Haidah, because the Bailam are no longer party to this dispute. So let's see the Gemara inside. Tavu Bailam. I'm like about halfway down on Daf Kuf Chesam and base. Tavu Bailam v'Haida. Tavu shomer v'Kafar. But the Ganav denied it to the shomer, who's really the party involved now, because he already paid for it. The heavy Adam and the shomer brought Adam. The shaila is niftar Ganav b'Dos Bailam. Do we say the Bailam must still have some involvement? And therefore, when the Ganav was moida to the Bailam, it's a valid Haidah, and he's potter from paying the Knas, or not? And the Gemara gives some insight. And do we say, Matzi Omer le-shomer le-Bailam? The shomer can tell the Bailam, Atun, you guys, Kivan de shaklusa lechu. The moment you accepted my payment for the object, I assumed liability for it. It's mine now. You are out of here. You're completely irrelevant to this conversation. And since you're irrelevant to the conversation, if the guy was moida to you, it's as if he was moida to some stranger on the street. Or maybe the Bible say, no, we're very much involved here. Just like you did us a favor and you paid us, even though you really didn't need to. And we're going to do a favor. We want to reciprocate. We're doing a favor for you. And what are we going to do? We're getting involved. We went to approach the Ganav. We didn't have to get involved, but we feel we want to reciprocate and we're going to get involved. And therefore, when we're getting involved, Shakalna anan didan, we'll take ours, ushakal atidach, and you take yours. So what is ours and what is yours? There's a shaila in the Rishonim. If ours is the Karen, his is the Kebel. But the way I learned it, which was a little bit confusing yesterday, was according to the way the Shita Mekubetzes interprets it in the name of the Ramah. So I actually copied it. So I'm going to learn that with you inside. Because my problem was, what do you mean, like you get yours, I get mine? Nobody's going to get kefil here. If the Bailam are considered legitimate Bailam here, no one's getting kefil. Because when the Ganav was muddy to the Bailam, it was a legitimate Haidah, and no one's getting kefil. So what do you mean I get mine and you get yours? What's going on over here? It should all be the shomers. So I thought maybe what they're saying is we get to keep the kefil. But how could someone argue that the Bailam get to keep the kefil if it's a Mefurish Mishnah and a Mafkid, that if the Shomer is Shilam v'leirach l'shava, if he was willing to pay, he gets the kefil. So our Gemara can't clear Shaila whether or not the Mishnah was right. So let's see this inside the Ramah. Tavu Bailam l'Shomer v'Shilam. The Acha Chukra Ganav. Tavu Bailam v'Haida. Okay. Tava Shomer v'Kafar ubo Edim. This is exactly our Gemara. Mi mifter Ganav v'Das Bailam aloi. Mi Armin, do we say the Alma? Normally, Heicha de Mishalim Shomer v'Leirach l'Shava. When the Shomer decided that he wanted to pay and he didn't swear, v'Hadar Tarchi Bailam. And then the Bailam still get involved, even though it's not their business anymore, but they get involved. And they run after the Ganav Basa Gamba. V'tavu v'dina, and they are moneying this Ganav and Din. And they were not moida. But also Sahada Vasidabe. And then Adam came along and said, You're chayiv. Kvela the Shomer Hava is the kefil belonging to the Shomer, which is what the Mishnah says. The Matzi Amalu Bailam, the Shomer can tell the Bailam, Atun Mamayna Hava Lachu. You got paid. I paid you already. So Likna Lachu Lagamri. You're not relevant to this situation anymore. Bein Mikaren, Bein Mikef. Bein Mikaren Dashalim Lachu. We paid you, so you definitely aren't entitled to the Karen. We get the Karen. The Kevel Nami less Lachu. You don't get Kevel either. The Kiva the Shalimna Lachu. The Mishnah says that once we pay you, Aknisu Li Kfela. We get the Kevel now. The less Lachu, Gabe Ganav, Vulamidi. And therefore you have no business with the Ganav at all. Hilach, therefore, Gabe Bayan, by our Shaila here, the Kami Boilam. Our discussion is, Ba'oidi Ganav Labailam, Lo Yadoi. It's not a Haidah, because the Bailam is considered a non-party over here. Oidam, do you say, and here's the bomb shel chiddush, be'alma hecha de tavu bailam leganav v'chayiv kefil for the bailam. Maybe when does the Mishnah in Hamafkit say that the bailam are makna the kefil to the shomer because of the shomer's kindness to pay and not hassle the owner with a shvuah? That's if the bailam walk away. They completely walk away. Then, of course, the Mishnah says that who gets the kefil? The shomer. But what if the Bailam still stay involved? They keep themselves involved. They show us that they're not relinquishing the kefil. They're still fighting. The Motzi Amrle l'Shomer, then the Bailam could tell the Shomer, Heicha da'avdas lanat, nayach nafsha l'shlumilan, just like you did us a big favor and you paid us when you didn't have to, anan nami avdinu lach milsa, we want to feel that we're still part of this. We want to reciprocate. V'tarchinan basar ganva, and we're going to run out to the Ganav. And we're going to help you retrieve that money that you laid out. When does the Mishnah say that by default the owner is makna the kefel to the shomer? That's if they're not getting involved. But if they are dedicated to be involved here, to help the shomer retrieve the money that he laid out from the Ganav, under those circumstances, we are not willing to be makna you the kefel. And therefore, shkoilak mamoina diloch, after we recover the money from the Ganav, you get the money back that you laid out for us, Mr. Shomer, the Yahavaslan. But vanan shaklidon kefel, the mamoina didon, we are not giving up the kefel under these circumstances. So according to the Ram, there's a bomb shal chiddush, that the Mishnah says, that once the Shomer pays, we say that the Bailam are maknim the kefel. That's not a sure bet. That's only if the Bailam wash their hands and go away. But if they're still actively involved in trying to retrieve and recover their geneva, then under those circumstances, that's not their das. So we look at their behavior, and depending on what their behavior is after they get paid out, will determine whether or not they were actually makna the kefil to the shomer.
They have an interest in getting that item back, and that's because they can get the kefil. So they're not fighting.
It depends what comes before, the cart or the horse. We're saying that when the Mishnah says that by default the Bailam will always be makna the kefil to a shomer who paid, it's not so simple. It depends on whether or not they want to remain involved, and therefore that'll determine whether or not the haidah to them is effective. So by them getting involved, they're actually doing more damage than good because they're involved.
Right.
God of his moide, and everybody loses. That's right. Even the ba'alma kitavu bailam when the schaif kefel is kefel the bailam have a hachanami gabe bayon heicha the oidalu bailam haidam al Yosy. If the Ganav was moide to the bailam and the bailam are involved, that will mean that they were moide to a relevant party. Upatim kefel, and that because of that the Ganav is patim kefel. The hadein boya to nafik migoi boya china. This shaila is totally in a shaila that we asked earlier. That's the Ramah. So that was proud in that Gemara. Okay, so now let's just continue on. We actually learned the Mishnah yesterday, so we'll quickly run through it, and then we'll learn the Gemara. Heichem Pikdani. The Mafkid tells the Shomer, where is my Pikadon? Amaloi Ovad. So it's Toyin Tainus Ovad. This is a textbook case. Mashbiachani, will you swear that I was Ovad B'Marmain? Mishalam Karen. You pay Karen, there's no kefil. This is not Toyin Tainus Kan. But Haidamay Atamai. Then Mishalam Karen B'Chai Mishvashim. And if you remember, we learned yesterday that if you're Haida Be'atzmai, even after Adam came, which is like a Shvach Haida, you still pay Keren Chamish Vashim. What about the classic textbook case of Toyin Tanis Ganav? Hechem Bektani Amaloi Ganav, Nignav. Mishbeach Haniv Amar Amein, Adam Moishe Shaganvai, Shamtu Shon Kevel, but Haida Be'atzmai, there it's Mishalim, Keren Chamish Vashim. And now we have an interesting case. Hagoy Shalasad. This time he stole from his father, Rahman al-Islam. Vinish Beloy, and he swore to his father falsely that he didn't take his money. Umace, and then the father died. So now, normally you pay to the victim or to the next of kin of the victim. But in this case, he is that person. So how is he going to be Mekayim the Hashava? So Areza Mekshalim Karen, Vichaimish, V'asham, Lebanav Oilach. Who are Banav and Achim? So Rashi learns Lebanav of his father, meaning the brother of the perpetrator. Oy la'achiv, or to the brother of the father, meaning if there's no children, then the Yerusha of the father goes to the father's brothers or to the uncles of the perpetrator. In other words, he has to pay in full. He cannot withhold his portion of the Yerusha, because in order for him to have his kapara, he has to completely pay out. If he withholds some of that money because he's a Yerush, then he didn't get his full kapara. Rashi learns Labanav means to his own children, or to his brothers. If you're giving it to his children are only getting it through him. So it's as if he gave it to him. So Tosfos says, a bombshell chiddush. It's a long Tosfos, but we'll just pick the bombshell line. And he says, sorry, the wrong Tosfos, it's over here. He says, V'nechshav kilumeis, v'rei banav yorshim chelka yim echav, V'heim ein boyin mikoychoy el mikoyach avu adam. Tosfos says that we look at it like this came directly from the grandfather. It didn't go through their father, meaning the father was mekayim his full responsibility of Hashava by giving it to his own children. That's how Tosfos writes it. What if he doesn't want to fully pay out? He doesn't want to take advantage of the fact that he owns a part of whatever tashlumin it is. Or he simply doesn't have the cash. Loiva, he borrows money. Now, the way I understood it, Rashi and Tosfos explained this line differently. Rashi learns he borrows money from other people, and he uses that money to pay back his brothers, to be mekayim in full the mitzvahs hashava. And now, since he borrowed money, he owes money, so the Balei Choiv can come. This Vav changed it to the Yerusha, but it's also the Hashava because it's what he paid into the estate. Eschelkoi, the chelik that he's entitled to, because once he pays it into the estate and he completely paid the money, Lamaisa, he still has an interest in the estate. So therefore, any liabilities that he has, they can still take his share of the estate. And therefore, they can take it. If he's a third, so 1/3 of whatever the estate has, he's entitled to. So the Balei Choiv can come and take up to 1/3 of the estate because that's what belongs to their loiva. Tosfos says more explicitly, "Nir lefarish loiva al karka shaloi mecher." You don't borrow money. You borrow money on land that you have. So now this land is meshubet to the malva, and he gives this land to pay back the chayim. So now this land is earmarked to the malva, so the malva can take it. Or Zok Tosfos, if the gezel is kayemes and he is giving back the actual item that he stole, he could designate this item that he stole as an apoitiki to the malva, so the malva is a direct right to come and get it. So basically, he paid with other people's money, and now it's going to be collected back, so it doesn't end up costing him a penny. Okay, gewaltig. Now another case. You should not have anoah from me, not a penny. So the question is, will it also be asur ba'anoah for him to accept Yerusha from his father? Zok the Mishnah emes Yerushenu. He could still yarshin. Now, even though it sounds like it is a discussion if the Yerusha works or not, that in fact is not a discussion. The discussion is merely whether he's allowed to have anoah from. But avada, the Isra anoah that the father makes does not change the rules of Yerusha that the Torah states. What if the father says, it's also for you to have anoah for me, not while I'm alive and not while I'm dead? Then he's not allowed to have hana from the estate. So what does he do to get around it? The yachzir levanav oilach. It should go to his children or his brothers, and that's totally in how you understand between Rashi and Tosfos. And if he doesn't have any money, meaning he doesn't want to comply with this Isra, no, he could do the same shtick that we said before. Loiva uvachayv boyim v'nif. Amar Yosef. What if there's no Yershim? What if there's no Yershim? You have to be Mekayim HaShava because you swore sheker to your father, and you got to be Mekayim HaShava. What do you do? Zok Yosef afilu la'arnik yishol tzedakah. As Rashi says, if you cannot find the Yerush, what should you do with the money? Get it out of your possession. Put it in the pushka. Amar Papa. But when he does it, he has to say, as Rashi says, he has to say, this is the Gzeil of my father. It's now out of my Rishus. I am now exonerated. Why go through that? Since he's the only Yerush, let him just be Michael himself. And that will be as if he paid back. So let him just be Michael himself. And mission accomplished. Milay Tanan, didn't we learn? And we had this mission earlier. What was a case where someone stole from somebody, but Machaloi ala Karen, but in Nignav was Michael the Karen. Remember, we said then you don't have to go to Madai. If you still have to pay back the Karen, even if you have to go to Madai, you must make a Chazara. But if the Nignav was Michael you, then you don't have to. So you see, Mechila works. Amma bar Mechila. So if Mechila works, so why bother if you're the only Irish? Why drive yourself crazy to put it in the pushka? Be Michael yourself. Zok Rashi, Milatan Mochale la Karen, Veloy Mekayim Mitzvah Sashop. You're right. There's no full kiyum of the Mitzvah Sashop. Because technically, you didn't give it back. But you still got it out of your Rishos technically. Alma Lemefik Yidek Zela Binan. You see from here that there's not really a chiyuv to do the action of giving it back, getting it out of your Rishos. You just have to make it that you're no longer in a state of gzela, meaning you're no longer in a state where you hold money that shouldn't be in your possession. How can you do that? You can do it indirectly with a mechila, right? So it's not a din of you physically giving something back. It's merely a din that you shouldn't have is stolen goods in your property anymore. And that you could do with mechila. So if it works with a third party being mechil you, hachanami kivan the Yerusha kameid nafla, since he's only Irish, he's no longer in a situation where he's holding on to something that doesn't belong to him because he's the Irish. So why was it necessary for him to put it to a push? Sorry, Chaim, it's an attack. The Gemara says, like a Pishke, halt es versich. Right? Sagt the Gemara, who Amar? Amar Bechen like Kasha. In fact, there's a machaloikis tanoim whether or not you could be mekayim whatever you need to do as far as the veheshiv with a mechila. Harab Yosy Glili holds you could be mekayim with a mechila. Harab Akiva holds you could not be mekayim with a mechila. Where are they arguing the time? They're arguing the following case. We're speaking about a ger tzedek because a person has no goyel, a person has zero relatives. Lahashav asha. Break the Gemara. V'chiyesh adam. The Tana asks. V'chiyesh adam be Yisrael she'ein lo goyelim. Everybody has a relative, and if he doesn't know whose relatives are, all he has to do is build a swimming pool in his backyard, and he will instantly discover every relative he ever has. Ella, who has no relatives at all? Ella begezel ager. I bet you even a ger can find relatives if he built himself a swimming pool, right? So Ella begezel ager. We're speaking about begezel ager. Hakasav adab. So Aresha gezel ager. What happens if someone stole from a ger? V'nishbaloy, and he swore to him exactly as the Torah describes a shvua, and then v'shama shemei seger, and of course he was moida. So now he's chayv to pay keren v'chayim shvashim. He wants to pay this to the ger, and Rachaman l'tzlan the ger dies. So now who is he going to pay to? And he was going to Yerushalayim, and this plan was to give, because the Torah says in this pasuk, we didn't finish the pasuk. The Torah says, "You know what you do to it? You end up paying the coin. The kohanim are entitled to that money. Besides the korban. So instead of the chaimish going to the bailim and the asham going to the mizbeach, the asham and the money go to Yerushalayim, and it's given to the Kohanim, and we'll elaborate on how that's done a little bit later. So that's what he does. He was on the way to Yerushalayim, and you know what happened? And he met the ger. Apparently, the ger was alive, and the report of his death was not true. Premature. It was premature, right? When my grandfather was in hospice care, I believe it was in Monroe, he had a roommate who was also in hospice care. And one day the Chevra Kedisha barges into the room and starts taking his roommate. And his roommate says, no, I'm alive. So they said, okay, we'll come back next week. Dave Zolti always has a first story that once Boo Boo and Ernie and the whole Ched, Shlomi Goldreich, they all came to visit, I believe, to visit his father maybe they were coming to visit him. David will correct me. They were going to visit him. They got off the elevator on the floor of the hospital, and they're walking towards it. I think it was Moshe Zolti's room. And Heshi Nussbaum tells Dave Zolti, Zeis de Chevra Kedisha kimt. They were just coming to visit. Okay. When David comes back, he'll be able to tell us what happened. Okay, so Zok Tegmur. The Pagabai Shager, V'Zok Fei Lov B'Milva. Now, there's a discussion on what V'Zok Fei Lov B'Milva means. At this point, we're going to say, it wasn't a formal acceptance, and then I'll let you have it. It just means you don't have to pay me. I'm Moichel. That's how the Gemara is understanding it. And the ger was a Moichel, Umeis, and then the ger dies. V'Balt, the ger doesn't have Yorishim, so automatically whatever the ger was Moichel is now mine. Zocha halah b'macha b'yodai. Whatever chiyuv he had to pay the ger to be mekayim his mitzvah is done already. So oy bezoi to Rabbi Yosy Glili, you see mechila helps. So from this brayz, you clearly see mechila helps. Rabbi Kiva says, "Ein loy takana." No, this does not work. You have to be paying somebody. You got to put it somewhere. You got to put it into a push. It will not work. So the Gemara wants to make an argument that Rabbi Yosy Glili. Now let's think about this for a second. In your mind, what is more logical where a mechila should help? Should a mechila help more if a third party is being meichel you, like the niknav is being meichel you? Or do you think it should work equally as well, even if you're meichel yourself, or nothing's really happening? I think logic would dictate that it's a bigger chiddush to say that if you're meichel yourself, it works, than saying that if you're meichel somebody else, that it works. Would you agree with that logic? Because at least I owed somebody something, and he's being meichel me, so he's sort of like giving it back. But if it's myself, it's like a game, taking it a bumper. So the Gemara here wants to say they're the same. The Gemara wants to equate them to be the same. So the same way Rabbi Kiva says that the third party mechila, the mechila of the ger, will not work for you. In the case of the ger, so too in our Mishnah it doesn't work, and that will be the Rabbi Kiva of our Mishnah. But Rabbi Kiva won't be able to agree with the mechila of the third party that we discussed, that if the guy's moichel you the keren, you don't have to go after him to badai. Rabbi Yosy Glili, loishna lenafshei loishna la'acherim moti machal. Rabbi Kiva loishna la'acherim loishna lenafshei loy moti machal. Rabbi Yosy, and according to Rabbi Yosy, who adin dafilu loizak b'milva, even if the ger didn't say, okay, you pay me and then I'll lend it back to you, even if that's not what happened, rather he's just moichel the payment l'chatchila, that will also work. So why did the Brisa express the case with the ger? With the ger was zok for love b'milva. That sounds almost like he paid me and then I lent it back to him. Really, according to Rabbi Yosy, you don't need that. It would work anyway because a mechila works. The reason why I picked that case is to show that Rabbi Kiva is very mach. Like the Rabbi Kiva, that filu zok for love b'milva. So it's more of a legit transaction. Still, ein like takana will not work. You have to physically pay out money at Yotzi Gzela Yitachashad. So that is the happening in the Gemara that we have in Machlokes. Whoever holds Mechila works. It works whether or not it's done for yourself or not. Whoever holds Mechila doesn't work. It doesn't work whether or not it's done by yourself or not. And therefore, we have three brises. So let's have a look at the three brises. Our Mishnah, not three brises, three Mishnahs. Our Mishnah says Mechila doesn't work. You have to pay. That will be going according to Rabbi Kiva, not according to Rabbi Yosy. We have the Mishnah we learned earlier that says that if the nignav is moichel, you don't have to run after him to madai, right? So the mechil did work. That's going to be Rabbi Yosy Glili. Where's the source of the machlokes? The source of the machlokes is the case of Gesel Lager, where Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yosy Glili expressed the machlokes. But there's a little bit of a difficulty with this pshat. Because let's think about it. The biggest chiddush for Rabbi Akiva, if he wants to express his biggest chiddush, that Mechila never works, where should it be? Where should he have said his chiddush? When it's a clear case of a third party being Meichel. Like the Mishnah we learned earlier that says that if the owner was Meichel, he doesn't have to run after him to Modeh, right? And there Rabbi Akiva says, no, even there you have to run after him to Modeh. So if that's what Rabbi Akiva holds, so how come that Mishnah decides to display the chiddush of Rabbi Yosy Aglili? That Mishnah is the best place to highlight the chiddush of Rabbi Akiva, because that's the best mechila. It's a complete third party being moichel me. There, we would want Rabbi Akiva to say it doesn't work, because that would highlight what Rabbi Akiva said. In our Mishnah, we're highlighting what Rabbi Akiva said. But if you think about it, in the case where you're moichel yourself, according to Rabbi Akiva, that's a smaller chiddush. If anything, here it should have highlighted Rabbi Yosy halacha. We have a Mishnah, one Mishnah that decides to highlight Rabbi Akiva, and one Mishnah that decides to highlight Rabbi Yosy Aglili. But it's the wrong case. When you want to highlight Rabbi Akiva, pick the biggest chiddush according to Rabbi Akiva, which is a legitimate third-party mechila. And when you want to highlight the klula of Rabbi Yosy Aglili, pick the best case where mechila shouldn't work, and say that it does work, which is the case of our Mishnah. So that is the problem with this pshat. If you want to say that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yosy Aglili disagree across the board, then the selection of mishnayos that Rebbe chose to highlight Rabbi Akiva's shita and Rabbi Yosy Aglili's shita were the wrong mishnayos, because he's picking the smallest chiddush to highlight Rabbi Akiva's chiddush, and he's picking the smallest chiddush to highlight Rabbi Yosy Aglili's chiddush. And therefore, maskif, I lost the place. I get too excited and then I lose the place. Maskif or Rav Sheshes. Correct Rav Sheshes Akasha. If in fact the machlokes is across the board, Rabbi Yosy Aglili holds mechila always works, and Rabbi Akiva holds mechila never works. Where should Rebbe have highlighted Rabbi Yosy Aglili's kula that mechila works is in our Mishnah, and the psak in our Mishnah should be that it is a good mechila, and you don't have to pay the money out. That would be the highlighting the biggest extreme chiddush of Rabbi Yosy Aglili. And the Rabbi Akiva, where should the Rebbe, the Mishnah, have highlighted Rabbi Akiva shita? In the Mishnah that we learned earlier, that says if the third party is Meichel, you don't have to run after him. The Mishnah should have said if the third party is Meichel, you still have to run after him, and that would highlight the greatest chiddush in Rabbi Akiva. Elam Rabbi Sheshes, because of that, I disagree with your pshat that Rabbi Yosy Aglili holds you can always be Meichel, and Rabbi Akiva holds you can never be Meichel. Rather, it's not like that. Rather, Rabbi Yosy Aglili. You can say that both mishnayos are going according to Rabbi Yosy Aglili. So our Mishnah that says it doesn't work, and the Mishnah earlier where it said mechila does work. But Kika Rabbi Yosy Aglili the Matzim Machil. Where did Rabbi Yosy Aglili say mechila works? That's lacherim. Aval inafshay, but for yourself you can't be machil. Ella amai zacha hala b'masha biyadai. So if that's the case, if you cannot be machil for yourself, so then how does the case of Gezel Ager works? How are you Zeich b'Mash b'Yadoi? That's mamish like you're being Meichel yourself. Why? Because you never paid the ger back, right? And what's going to happen is when he dies, you're the Yarshim that part of the ger, because since he has no Yarshim, you're the first ones there, and you're being Meichel yourself. Didn't Rabbi Yosy Aglili say you can't be Meichel yourself? Zok Gemara, we should be Zok from the love of Milveh. So now we're changing shots. Until now we said Zok from the love of Milveh is Lavdafka. Now it's a real Zok from the love of Milveh. The ger said it's as if I got it for you and then I'm lending it back to you. So that's really a third party mechila. Gewaltig. So that is how Rav Sheshes wants to learn that Rabbi Yosy Aglili makes a distinction between lenafshe, where you can mechila doesn't work, while for a third party mechila does. Rav David, we were discussing a story with the Chaver Kedisha that came out of the elevator to visit a patient, and Heshi Nisbah said, "Kick the Chaver Kedishas to." Who was the patient? It
was his father.
Oh, it's Matcha Nisbam.
Yeah. And he says, "Oy vay, tatet the Chaver Kedish." Anyway.
Okay, Gavaltig. Rabba said, how about Rabbi Akiva? Let's say they're both Rabbi Akiva. Once you're making a distinction between Linafshe and Lacherim, so then you could do that in Rabbi Akiva as well. Ki Amar Rabbi Akiva L'Loi Matzi Mocho is Linafshe. Aval Lacherim Matzi Mocho. You can do that for Rabbi Akiva too. Michlal, based on this shot, That's telling us that Rabbi Yosy Glili argues, says you could always be moichel. Mechlal Rabbi Yosy Glili savar afilu l'nafshei nami moti mochel. Couldn't be moichel for yourself, which means that Rabbi Yosy Glili will disagree with our Mishnah, and he would hold you don't need to do this whole transaction. You could just be moichel for yourself. Correct? Gemara, if that's the case, if you could be moichel for yourself, so then el gezel ager the ka'amar achmana nesina lekahanim hechem mishkafesla. Why would you ever have to pay the kahanim? I should just be moichel myself. The Torah says if you stole from a ger and there's no one to pay back to the kahanim. Why? Be moichel yourself. Why do I need it? Omarava, you know why? You know in which specific case the Torah says you have to give it back to the kahanim? It's where you couldn't have been moichel. Why not? Hacha kishagazal asager v'nishbeloi u'moisager v'hoydel acher misa. If you were moida before the misa of the ger and it already created the chiyuv, you already owe him to pay him back the keren b'chaimish. Then once he dies, you could be moichel yourself because the chiyuv is there already. But what if you were still in denial when he died and you were only moida after he died? There, when the chiyuv gets created, the Torah creates the chiyuv differently. The be'idin the ID kanai Hashem. The chiyuv was created that you have to pay directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nasnu l'kayanim, and Hashem granted that to the kayanim. As it says in the pasuk, the be'ein leish goyel lahashem v'ashem elav ha'ashem amushav l'Hashem. Hashem. The gzera is the Torah says then you give it back to Hashem. And what does Hashem do with it? L'kayin milvad ela kippurim, besides the korban. So the only time gezel ager pays the kayin is only if he was first moida about his false ruah afterwards, not before. I don't know who exactly he's moida to. There's no baldover to be moida to. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Zok to Gemara, boy Ravina. We're going to soon see that that's not such a good deal, giving it back to the kohen, because we're soon going to see that if you give it back to the ger, you just give him back what you stole. When you're paying the kohen, you don't get away with you. Boy Ravina. Ravina had a shayla. What about Gozal Hagiyoris now? Does the same halacha apply to if you stole from a giyoris that you bring it to the kohen? Mahu ish amar rachman v'loy isha. It says v'mein lo ish goyel. Oidilma urchei dekrahu. The Torah normally refers to mankind as ish. I shouldn't say that. Humankind as ish, right? Amar lei Rav Aaron.
No, not even you. People.
People kind. Okay.
Human has man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Amalei Rav Aaron Ravina. Rav Aaron told Ravina, Toshma, I'm going to bring you a riot to this shayla. The Tanya ish, ainly, no, I did not hear it. I'm not Rav Aaron, no. The Tanya ish, ainly ala ish, isha minayin. How do you know that this halacha applies equally to a woman who's a giyaris? Keshehu oimer, when the Torah says hamusha v'arekan shnayim. So there's two ways to learn this. Let's look at the pasuk inside. The me'ein lo ish goyel lahashiv ha'asham elav. So that's one discussion of lahashem ha'asham elav. And then ha'asham hamusha v'lashem. So it says it discusses the lashon hashava twice. That's one way this is learned. But there's another way that this is learned is because it says asham twice. So let's look at Rashi Rekam Shnayim. Either Trey Hashava is ksiv, lahashav hamusha. It says two lashons of hashava. Or lishnachwina Trey Hasham is ksivi, lahashav asham ha'asham hamusha. So is it because hashava is mentioned twice, or it's because asham was mentioned twice? In fact, Gemara, if that's the case, if it applies equally to man and to woman, ish. So why did it say ish? It just says v'mein goyel. Why did it say v'mein ish goyel? The teretz is ish at the tzarich lachzer acharav. Only if it's a man, an adult man. This is a huge chiddush. Do you have to see if he might have yorshim? Maybe he had a child that you're not aware of. He may still no, but cotton. If the ger that you stole from is under bar mitzvah, then you don't have to even check to see if he has children, because a cotton cannot have children. Cotton yet a tzarich lachzer acharav. You know why? And Rashi says it's this pasuk from where we know that a minor, someone who doesn't have shtei cyrus, cannot have two children. Even though he's royal Levi once he's 9 years old, but he cannot father a child till he's bar mitzvah. And there's a big discussion about that. So let's quickly see Tosfos. Cotton yet the tzarich lachzer frek Tosfos. What do you mean cotton? Vim timer gezel ger cotton heit mishkachla. How could a ger cotton own anything? Where does he have property from? But ain't schila cotton. So how would you have property in the first place? The gezel cotton with the vraim will be the rice because it doesn't really belong to him, and you can't teach Yerusha because a ger doesn't yesh. Zok Toises v'yeshloim the Davka Metzia. Exactly what Chaim is saying. The Davka Metzia, the Indas Acheres Maknoisoi. For him to initiate a kinyan on his own, that won't work. But if someone gives him something, in fact, he can have something. So you can't steal from a ger. There's a big discussion. Toises elsewhere asks that the brings rise that people fathered children when they were much younger. Even Rivka had no, Rivka didn't have children much younger. But people had children when they're under bar mitzvah. The Gemara brings rise. So Toises says the Shtana Teva. There was a time where children reached puberty before they were bar mitzvah, much before they were bar mitzvah. But the times have changed, and now it's bar mitzvah time. Okay? So Zog to Gemara Vayter. Taner Rabban, Lashem Lakai. What does that mean? Kanai Hashem. Hashem is kind of this payment of Keren B'chaimish. The Nosnoi Lakain Shabbat Mishmar, and who gets it? The kain of the Mishmar, not the Mishmar who was working in the Beis Hamikdash the week that I was moida, or the week that I swear, the week that I come with my carbon and my money to the Beis Hamikdash. Whoever is in power that week, whichever family is doing the budget that week, they're entitled to the carbon. They're entitled to the money. Maybe I have a right, like Truma Maishas, I play this no. I can give it to whoever I want. If I have an item a coin, I can give it to him as support. Who said I have to just give it to the mission when it gets distributed? We're comparing the payment to the carbon that is bringing. If you're bringing a carbon, you have a carbon that you have to bring a dova, chatos, and you can't say, I want my son-in-law to have the meat. It doesn't work that way. The meat is shared by all of the kahanim working at it. Taner Rabban, Hareisha Yagoisel Koyin. Sorry?
Why should you ever know?
Your Chumash and Maishas, you can get to whoever you want. You can get that or not.
That's not a punishment. This is a punishment.
If it means a kapara, you shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be making money. But what about an adab? What if you say Laila? You're giving an adab there also. You can. I hear. Okay. Taner Rabban, you could also wait till the sun's on duty. Taner Rabban, Hareisha Yagoisel Koyin. What if the coin was the goslin? What if the coin has to bring the Keren v'chaimish v'ashim? Minayin, how do we know? Shelo Yarmei shouldn't say. Hoyel v'yoytzeh lekahanim. Since anyway, where is this money that I'm paying going to go? It's going to kahanim. I already am holding it. So actually, let me keep it.
Just bring it. So.
What? Okay. But even so, even if he's on a mishmar, it'll be distributed even to all the kahanim. He wants to keep it. It's shown by Mir and Tosh. He used to always collect money when he was a little kid. It's kind of Chamir and Tosh. Right? So, Zok to Gemara, maybe he should say it is. It didn't make sense. Im bishal acherim hu zoicha. Madech, if he's on duty and someone brings in the money, he's going to have a share in it. Bishal atzma l'kolshkein. Surely, if it's his own money that he's bringing in, he should surely get a chelik. Rab Nassanheimer, he had a different version of the Kal V'chaimer, a little bit more complicated. B'loshen achar. Uma davar she'ein loy chelik boy ad sheyichnes b'shusoi madech a carbon. That if someone's bringing a carbon, I have no right to touch it. Rashi shem nosna. If let's say the word the halacha is if a kohen brings a carbon, the kohen is bringing carbon himself. The kohen does get to keep his entire carbon, so it's not subject to be divided evenly amongst the kohanim. So if a kohen brought a carbon and he wants to give it bedavka to me, yeah, after shlomim, whatever you mean. So he could keep the meat, and therefore he can also designate who the meat should go to in lieu of him. So what Rav Nosson is saying is, Ma darash ein lechelek boy achi yichnas pershusay. If I was gifted this from another kohen who brought the carbon, I have no shaykhs to this until it's actually given to me. Nevertheless, once it's given to me, once this meat is given to me, nobody can take it away from him. This is our Rashi learns. This is our Rashi learns. Tosfos learns much simpler. It's referring to Trumas and Maishus. Madach Trumas and Maishus, where I have no shaykhs to it. It belongs to the Bailam before I get it. But once he gives it to me, it's mine, and nobody can say I want to share it. If we're talking about the money of the Keren of the Chaimish, the Keren v'Chaimish, we're talking about that money, which every kohen automatically is entitled to a chelik of it, because the Torah says right away it goes to every kohen. So surely, if it's taki in my reshus, like I have it, surely surely nobody should be able to take it from me. No. Lo im amrit, You can't compare it. You can't make such a kal v'chaymer. Because yes, you are at a disadvantage in truma before it's given it to you, but you're at the same disadvantage as everybody else. You're right. You didn't have a chelik in it, but neither did anybody else. So therefore, maybe it goes to you exclusively. Before it was given to you, yes, you had a chelik in it, but so did everybody else. So you're trying to show that you have more rights to it. You don't have any more rights to it. You're on equal ground. Ella, gezela yoyte b'tachas yadoy. So the conclusion is that the gzela should leave the kohen's hand. He doesn't get to keep it. Umischalik l'chol echa b'kohen, and it's divided evenly amongst all his brothers, the kohanim. He doesn't get to keep it. His logic doesn't work. But do we have a problem? Because it says ish es kadeshav lo yihu. When you bring your own carbon, you get to keep the entire carbon. So over here, the Eila Osham belongs to the Kohen completely. And Rashi says, the Zachibe, so therefore Gezel Nami Tideu. If he's Zoich in his own carbon, because the Torah says you keep your own carbon, so then the money which is connected to the carbon should also belong to him. Because we learn from the pasuk which talks about the money, and then it says milvad ela kippurim. We learn from there that whatever the carbon that he brings is given to, those same people get the money. So if he gets the carbon exclusively, because we know he gets his own carbon exclusively, shouldn't he also get his money exclusively? So Gemara, you're right. If in fact he was bringing his own carbon and he gets all the meat exclusively, in that case he actually would get to keep his money. So what case is the Brisa referring to where the Kohen does not get to keep his money? It gets distributed evenly amongst all the Kohanim. The Kohen was Tameh. He couldn't bring his own carbon. Since he couldn't bring his own carbon, who's going to bring the carbon for him? The regular Kohanim. In such a case, the money goes to the Kohanim as well. Sorry? What do you mean? Why else? He's bringing the carbon. It's his carbon. Right, so he can't be makrabit, but they can still bring it on his behalf. Yeah. So if it's b'kayin tamei, davar sheyesh lechelik boy mi islay. So what do you mean? What do you mean? There's any chelikin? Zok Rashi, ib'kayin tamei hechi matzal meimar davar sheyesh loy chelik boy. How could you even say that it's a davar sheyesh lechelik boy? V'kayin lam bezvachim dein tamei chelik b'kachim mizbeach. V'afilu boiris the gezel gerim nami kachim mizbeach. So the coin shouldn't have any chelik in it at all. Where you're saying it's speaking with the Kohen's tummy. And with the Kohen's tummy, he just gets his fair share amongst everybody else. Forget the same way he doesn't get to have his meat, he shouldn't have any money. So once again, we're stuck. Where does he only get his fair share and not anybody else? Zok to Gemara, El Asha, Lakayin, Misteachuza. Okay, so Nachamo. It's the Gemara first said it's by Kohen Tameh where we're saying he doesn't get to keep the money. But Frank Gemara, if it's by Kohen Tameh, what do you mean Davar Sheyesh Lechelik Boy? He gets. Because what did it say? What did we say before? I just want to make sure I'm not making a mistake. It says the Brisa said Shekashem Shein Lechelik Boy Kach Ein Lachem Chelik Boy. Clearly, the discussion of the Brisa is speaking where he does have a chelik in it, right? Because the Brisa said that his whole argument was, since I have a chelik in it, for sure I should be able to keep it. So clearly, this Brisa cannot be discussing a case where the Kohen is Tameh, because where the Kohen is Tameh, this whole Brisa wouldn't be relevant. So the question is, once again, how do we know that a Kohen does not get to keep his chelik? Zok Gemara, that we learn it from a different pasuk. We're abandoning what we've been saying until now, and we're going to have a new svara. So let's see what it says in the pasuk. The halach is by a steyachuza. If you have a steyachuza and you sell it, and you donate it to Bezdin, you have a certain amount of time to be poided from Bezdin. If you're not, Bezdin will sell it to any pan who comes up and buys it. And then when Yovel comes, Bezdin gets back that field. You know what Bezdin does with that field? It distributes it evenly to the Kahanim that Mishma. So we learn this halacha from that halacha. Yeah, you donate to the Beis Hamikdash, and you're not pointed. If Bezdin sells it to a third party, that third party only gets to keep it until Yovel, Once Yovel arrives, it goes back to the Beis Hamikdash, and then it gets given to the Kohen. The Tanya we learned, Achuzasoi, Matamad Loim. So the pasuk says as follows. V'haya had sada. I'm sorry. It's Haya sada. V'tseise b'yovel kodesh Lashem kistei acherim lakayin tia. And then the pasuk sticks next to word achuzasoi. It says lakayin tia goes to the kohen. Why is there an extra word over here of lakayin tia achuzasoi? So the bride says achuzasoi matamad loimer. Why do we need this word? Because minayin l'sada yotzei lakahanim b'yovel. How do we know that a sada that goes to the kahanim b'yovel? V'gala echad min kahanim. And who ended up buying it from Hektish after the Yisrael was makdish? A kohen was makdish. So let him say, since no matter who would have bought it, it's going to be distributed evenly to the kahanim b'yovel. I already have it in my hand because I'm the one who bought it. Maybe I should be able to keep the entire field. Vidinu, and it's mistaber. He's making an argument. It's mistaber that I should be able to keep the whole thing. Because if it's from a totally third party, I'm going to get my fair share as a kohen in that mishmar. If it's coming from me myself, surely like koshkan I should get. Tamad loimer kistei acherim l'koyin tia achuzasai, and we learn achuza shaloi vein zeh shaloi. And the Likutei Rashi says achuzasai. You know what he gets to keep? Land that he yarshin from his father. That's what he gets to keep. This land he doesn't get to keep. So the extra achuzah is to tell him, only your achuzah, only land that you yashim from your father, do you get to keep past Yovel. This land that you were paida is going to go back by Yovel, and you'll just get your fair share. And it's distributed evenly to all his brothers Hakayin. So my question is, how does a kohen have a stay achuzah? How does a kohen yashin a field from his father? Kohanim didn't get land. So I'm thinking the only way it's possible is if his father married a Yisraelis and she yarshed land because she didn't have any siblings. So the son-in-law got it. So now you have a kohen who got land for Yerusha, so it would go to a son. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll be mashal tomorrow. No problem. My clock keeps me up anyway. No.